You did not do anything wrong. You worked your money. And if there are people, aka Canadians, telling you that you are taking away their jobs, ignore them, because that is not true. And don't ever think that that is true. It is not true. So for temporary residents, they are planning to bring in 673,000 persons for 2025. Then for 2026, they are planning 516,000 people. And then for 2027, they are planning to bring in 543,000 people plus 600 here, 600, 650, as you can see. Would I apply to travel to Canada in 2025? With all the changes to immigration rules, the question is, should you apply to travel to Canada? If you're in the process of gathering your documents, you are wondering, should you go ahead and apply to travel to Canada? Is it worth it? Especially in 2025, when we all know that it's about to be election. That is a big deal because that will change things. Now, how much changes will happen, we are not sure. But at the end of the day, persons have been attacking immigrants and immigration in general. And what that means is, if everyone is saying immigration is a big issue where there are too many people coming into the country, then you have to expect that there's going to be a significant slash as it relates to persons being able to travel to the country. Now, in 2024, there has been so many different rules that came about just to reduce the number of international students and just reduce the number of immigrants who travels to Canada. Now, the first thing to know about is that initially back in like 2021, after COVID-19 happened, what happened is that the government made the decision that he wanted to increase the number of persons who travel to Canada so that the country can eliminate inflation. So it didn't eliminate inflation, however, it did significantly reduce inflation. So what that means is, because inflation was significantly reduced, it was a good idea for the influx of immigrants to travel to Canada. However, something you have to note is that it wasn't only skilled people who were traveling to the country in large sums. There were many persons from Ukraine due to the war and things like that. There were many persons who came from Ukraine, came from places who were seeking asylum, and that is really where the challenge comes in, where these persons are coming here with no money, so they have to rely and depend on government support for at least a couple months before they can get settled into the country. These are also persons who they didn't assess their skills in order to travel to Canada. Now, when it comes to coming here as a permanent resident or as an international student, let me talk first about permanent residents and like worker. You initially have some work experience which can be transferred into Canada, and more than likely you are also in a good financial situation where you're not depending on the country right away. Now, if you're an international student, and even despite what anybody says, even listen to me clearly, even if you travel to Canada and you came here and work for your money, living in Canada, it doesn't matter. You did not rely on the country. You came here, worked your money, and paid your tuition. Nothing is wrong with that. So anyone who tells you something is wrong with that, ignore them. You did not do anything wrong. You worked your money. And if there are people, aka Canadians, telling you that you are taking away their jobs, ignore them, because that is not true. And don't ever think that that is true. It is not true. The reason why immigrants need to travel to Canada is because they are unable to fill the labor gaps that are in the country. Therefore, there's no way you are coming here and competing for jobs from Canadians. As an international student, if that wasn't your case, the next way is that you literally picked up thousands of dollars for 3 years, for 2 years, 3 years, 4 years to do a degree, and you picked up that money and brought it to Canada and spent it to pay tuition. So therefore, if that is you, you definitely did not put any strain on the country. However, there are many people saying immigrants put the strain on the country. Moving along. Permanent residents. Permanent residents, again, need to have a high level of skill to be able to travel to Canada. If you look at the eligibility for someone to be able to travel to Canada as a permanent resident, they need to be in a knock A or B job. That is a highly skilled job, which means they have significant work experience to allow them to easily integrate into the country. So if they are saying immigrants put a strain on the country, that is not true. However, people will always have their opinions, so therefore just ignore them. Now, let's go into, should you make the sacrifice and travel to Canada in 2025? Now, how I'm going to answer this question is by showing you actual numbers provided by the IRCC website, where they directly tell you how many people they are letting into the country in 2025, 2026, and 2027. Now, that is how you are able to decide if it's worth it to travel to Canada or not. Now, within 2025, my personal predictions is that there are going to be a lot more rules as it relates to immigration, and it can be either positive or negative. So therefore, what I would recommend is, it doesn't matter at what point you're watching this video, whether you're watching this in June of 2025, December of 2025, 2026, the main way to decide if you should still apply to immigrate to Canada is by looking at the numbers. Look at how many people they are bringing into the country. And you can also look at statistics in previous years of how many people they brought in and do a comparison. That will really shed light on should you apply or not. So let's get into the computer and let me show you what the numbers are saying. So I'm just going to screen share right now. Let me just back you up a bit away from me. All right. You are a bit out there now. This feels better. This is good distance, social distance. All right, let's go. All right, so I'm going to screen share over here for you. And I usually use Canada, Statistics Canada, to know what is going on in Canada. The first thing I'm going to look up is the number of persons who they plan on bringing to the country in 2025, 2026, and 2027. So in the next 3 years. So here you see canada.ca. So that is the website that I'm going to be using to see the numbers. So you can go through all of this. I'll leave this link down in the description box so you can check it out. But these are the numbers. So for temporary residents, they are planning to bring in 673,000 persons for 2025. Then for 2026, they are planning 516,000 people. And then for 2027, they are planning to bring in 543,000 people plus 600 here, 600, 650, as you can see. Now, this is just temporary residents they are referring to. And this is the amount of people they are bringing just for temporary residents. Now, looking at this number, do you think you should apply to immigrate here? Do you think you should apply to become a temporary resident in Canada? Yes, based on these numbers, why can't you be one of these 673,000 people? So that's my answer for temporary residents. Now let's go and find the numbers for permanent residents. So here are the numbers for permanent residents. As you can see, for permanent resident, they have, this is on the Canada's website, the official website. They said for 2025, they are taking in 395,000 permanent residents. Then 2026, they are taking in 380,000 permanent residents. And then for 2027, they are taking in 365,000 permanent residents. And then when you scroll down, they have refugees and protected persons, where they have some numbers for those persons as well. So Should you apply to travel to Canada in 2025? My answer is yes. Based on these numbers, you can more than be one of these 395,000 people. Now, let's look at the year before and see how much of a difference are the numbers as it relates to 2024, 2023. How much of a difference are these numbers since those years? And these are easy Google searches you can do. You can type exactly what I'm typing here. So I'm just saying 2024 immigration levels. You can always Google something like this and see the same thing that I'm seeing here. I always look at either canada.ca or Statistics Canada. So right here you can see for 2022 they have 437,000 permanent residents were welcome to Canada in 2022. That's just the number for permanent resident. Let's try and memorize this number, 437,000, and let's look back over here and see how much they are welcoming in 2025 to see a comparison. So they are welcoming 395,000 people. So let's just do the math. So here they have 437,539, and let's minus the numbers for 2025. 395. 1, 2, 3. So based on these numbers, as you can see, they only reduced the number of immigrants by 42,539 people. That is the only reduction that they actually made, despite all of what you've been hearing. However, the main focus was on students, not necessarily permanent residents. So if you're applying for permanent residency, as you can see here, you are good. You are golden. Now let's take a look at what happened for temporary residents. So here, as you can see, Canada's official website, it's where there's an annual report from Parliament that states a total of 4,789,000 persons traveled to Canada and were issued documents for visitors, students, and temporary workers. 4 million people, almost 5 million persons were given temporary residence in 2022. Now, this alone can show you why there's a significant reduction and a lot of rules as it relates to immigration. This is 5 million people coming into the country within a year. And this is only for temporary residents. This does not include the numbers for permanent residents. It doesn't include Canadian citizenship. It doesn't include refugees. Those are not calculated here as yet. So we go over here and we look at permanent resident numbers, and we can see where there's a significant reduction, because their goal is to bring in 673,000 people, and in 2022 they brought in 4 million, almost 5 million people into the country. So ultimately, what does these numbers mean to you? And what should these numbers mean to you? So based on these numbers, what it's saying is that if you are eligible and you have a strong application, you should go ahead and apply. It doesn't matter what type of restrictions that are coming in. It doesn't matter how they are restricting things. Once they don't say the border is closed and we're not processing any more applications, you should go ahead and apply. Ultimately, no matter what the change is, immigration is something that will always exist. Even if it happens that someone decides to close the border, which would be the best decision at this time, but it will not happen because there are a lot of labor gaps still in Canada. They really need health professionals and they need construction workers. So the border will never be closed because of that reason, because they cannot source those resources here within Canada. Therefore, if you would like to apply to travel to Canada, you can always go ahead and apply. That is what I would say to you, and that is just based on the numbers. They are taking in applications. They didn't say that the border is closed and they're not taking in applications. So For anyone who asked me if they should still go ahead and apply, that is my answer. Yes, and I already told you that already anyway. Immigration is not going anywhere. Despite everything that you hear online and on the news, that is not the full picture of what's really happening. And even if it did reduce more significantly than that, once it's not closed, you're free to apply. Just make sure you have a strong application, like the little weak application where there are things that are unclear and you don't have enough of this and enough of that. Make sure everything is enough and over, more than enough. So that is what you'll need to get to Canada. And once you have your good strong application, apply. And don't worry about every news and everything that you hear and prime minister changing and or not changing or whatever the case may be. That doesn't matter. The only thing you need to care about is the border open or closed, and are they taking in 0 persons into the country? If they are taking in 5 people into the country, then you might need to reconsider. But ultimately, you will always have a chance once you have a strong enough application. So that is my answer to that question. I hope you found it helpful. Remember to subscribe to the channel for more videos all about Canadian immigration and personal development. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.